Many years ago, I rented a house. After signing the lease and moving in, my landlord stopped by to see if I had any questions or concerns. During our casual conversation, he mentioned that the house had previously been owned by some weird people, as he put it. He told me that when he bought the house, the walls had been painted black by the former owners, and there were ashes, garbage, and spray-painted messages scattered throughout. He didn't provide many details, but I remember being curious about what it had been like and thinking it made for an interesting story. At first, everything seemed normal, but over time, due to some unseen influence from within the house, my life began to unravel. I lost my job, my family, and flunked out of school. As I became increasingly isolated in the house, strange occurrences began to take place. I started to hear loud pounding noises on the outside walls. Initially, it was an occasional loud thump, but over time, it transformed into rhythmic knocking, so obvious, intense, and insistent that I was convinced someone was trying to scare me. It couldn't have been a branch or the settling of the house. It was the unmistakable sound of a strong adult pounding aggressively on the exterior walls. The knocking would occur sporadically, sometimes just 3 days apart, and other times as much as a couple of weeks, and always at odd hours of the night. As a night owl, I became familiar with these unnerving sounds, though not truly accustomed to them. Out of fear, I started carrying a baseball bat with me as I moved around the house at night. One night, when it happened on an exterior wall directly in front of where I was facing indoors, the knocking was to the right of a window AC unit, which I had just glanced at. I immediately ran outside to confront the prankster. However, to my dismay, there was no one there. I searched for footprints, listened for any sounds, and looked for cars, anything that could explain the noises. There was absolutely no evidence that anyone had been there. Other strange physical occurrences took place as well. For instance, lightning struck just a few yards away from a window I was sitting by. It was terrifying and occurred out of nowhere, like an explosion. Unexplainable white lights would appear on the walls at night. The most distressing aspect of living in that house, however, was not the physical phenomena, but the unseen psychological and situational effects it had on my life. I hastily moved out of the house shortly after the incident with the knocking. Once I left, the unexplained physical phenomena stopped immediately, but the psychological effects lingered. Fortunately, within a few years, I recovered psychologically, and my life returned to normal. That concludes my story, but in closing, I want to encourage you and your listeners to be cautious about the houses you choose to live in. When I first moved into that house, there were no signs of trouble. However, I wonder if the help of a psychic, or maybe a spiritual cleansing, could have prevented this terrible experience.